Hello folks, Nerdmotron here, just following up on my last video where I reviewed the latest series of Doctor Who, up to episode 6. I also laid down some rather wild theories as to where the series was headed. Did I get anything right? Even remotely? Well, let's find out as I take a look at the finale for Series 14 slash Season 1. Apologies in advance if there's a bit of coughing and spluttering and sniffling and so forth. I will try and edit around it as much as I can. Just been a little bit under the weather of late. Is it hay fever? Is it a cold? Let's spin the wheel!
I bring Swift's gift of death.
So, straight down to business with episode 7, The Legend of Ruby Sunday. And there really is no mucking around with this one. The Doctor comes whizzing on in, and after a few quick hellos and introductions, it's straight down to the matter at hand. I know I have criticised this series for feeling a little bit rushed at times, but I recognise that we've got quite a lot to get through with these couple of episodes. So we really just need to get straight down to business as quickly as possible. I'm not a big fan of the TARDIS flying around like it has been in this series. I don't mind when it does that when there's a purpose to it, like with the Runaway Bride, for example, when he has to catch the taxi that Donna's trapped in. I just don't think the zipping around that we see in this episode and in Space Babies in particular, it just doesn't seem very TARDIS-y to me. And I'm glad it's just an occasional thing. It really does crack me up every time I see the unit tower. I just find it very funny that this organisation, which was written out of existence in the Chibnall era, now has a full-on Avengers tower smack in the middle of London. I just find that very funny. Interesting to see UNIT actively recruiting former companions of the Doctor. That'll be good to allow us to check in with former companions from yesteryear, mostly probably in the UNIT spin off series that we're getting. Remember when Doctor Who had an extended universe of spin off TV shows? Some of them are even sometimes good. Mel is great. I love Mel. And Bonnie Langford is killing it in these episodes. Good to see UNIT just casually experimenting with a time window. They were a thing from back in Series 2, where a bunch of clockwork robots were punching holes in time for reasons. We're talking about the bumbling chumps who could barely stop an angry Furby in the Star Beast. And now these guys are poking a hole in the fabric of the universe. That's probably not going to end well. And spoiler alert, it goes about as badly as it possibly could. I like the scene with Ruby in the time window. There's good tension there with the fact that they can't move around very much or they risk breaking time or whatever. You just know as soon as that guy starts moving around behind the TARDIS that something terrible is going to happen. And it does. There's some really serious acting going on as well with the Doctor and Kate's reactions to what happens to that guy. The Doctor clearly just utterly gobsmacked and dismayed that he's essentially caused this to happen. And Kate's look of, I don't even really know what it is, like disgust and dismay and anger, all of the above. It's really good. Getting a little bit ahead of myself. We'll back up just ever so slightly. I was lured in once again by talk of the Doctor's granddaughter. A large part of my, in retrospect, absolutely absurd theory for this series revolved around Susan Foreman. And it was all tied in with the Susan Twist actor and the characters that she was playing. Although my theory had more to do with the actor herself than with the characters she was portraying. I was right about Susan Twist being the connective tissue between the episodes in this series, though, to be fair, that was pretty obvious. But I was dead wrong about the unimportance of her characters. Basically, I was wrong about everything. Okay? Is that what you want to hear? Are you happy now? It was absolutely nail-biting when the Doctor finally catches up with Susan Triad, the Susan Twist character for these episodes, and goes to shake her hand, thinking that it's going to reveal her to be his granddaughter, and then nothing happens. Side note, the line
Do you dream about being an ambulance?
is just so incredibly silly out of context. And in context, quite frankly. So all the little nods to Susan Foreman were a big misdirect from RTD, and also part of the theme of family bonds running through this season, which was probably more to the point. But it did double duty by tricking me once again. I like the cheekiness of Kate scoffing that the TARDIS anagram is obvious. Because yes, it is obvious. So obvious that everyone in the audience had been guessing it for weeks. And hindsight is 2020 and all that, but that really ought to have been a clue. The obvious answers and the answers that we want aren't always going to be the right ones. Sometimes this leads to fun, interesting twists and payoffs. Sometimes it means something being very strongly hinted at, but the truth being quite the opposite, and maybe not in an entirely convincing way. The anagram clue is revealed not to be taken from TARDIS with S Triad, but rather from Susan Triad Technologies, the tech company owned by Susan Twist's character for these episodes, Susan Triad. Keeping up with all the Susans, I hope. Anyway, it's Sutek, as in the god of death that the Fourth Doctor once defeated. Good on RTD for the misdirection with this one. It is a little bit contrived, but then it's Doctor Who, isn't it? Which brings me on nicely to the reveal of the big bad. I was a little bit worried at first with the evil cloud thing hanging about the TARDIS. It did make me think of Galactus from Rise of the Silver Surfer, and I will thank people to stop doing that to me now, please. I love the sickly sounding TARDIS. I also like the reversal of our perceptions when it comes to the TARDIS. The sight of the TARDIS is supposed to inspire hope, not utter dread. And then a big dog appears, and people get skull faces. Susan Triad transforms into a skull-faced death monster and reaches for the Doctor to give him Sutek's gift of death. How will this thrilling cliffhanger be resolved? Mel just pulls him out of the way. I mean, simple solutions for simple problems, I guess. And this, of course, brings us on to episode 8, Empire of Death. I did make two strong declarations in my predictions for this finale. What it will not end with, the Doctor killing anyone, or having to reboot the universe. We've seen that enough times at this point. And not to get too ahead of myself again, but basically both of those things happen. And yet I'm fine with it, so fuck me, I guess. The skull-faced Susan Triad laughs at the Doctor for him thinking that she was his family. I like that these episodes are taking little digs at the audience like that. And especially at smart arses who thought they'd figured everything out. Or maybe it's just me that feels like that. Shades of Infinity War here, with everyone getting dusted. Kate's little goodbye is very sad. And like with Infinity War, we all knew that this was going to be reversed somehow. But even so, in the moment, it was grim in the best way possible. I thought it was very funny that Sutek's grand plan to escape his exile was to grab hold of the TARDIS and hope for the best. We call that one the Jack Harkness Special. Although actually, now I come to think of it, knowing him, he probably uses that to refer to his penis. Anyway, silly though the plan is, I like the idea of him hitching a ride on the TARDIS to plant his acolytes all over the place. And right under the Doctor's nose, too. Very strategical 4D chess thinking from old Sooty there. It's not what I expected, and it's certainly not what I wanted, but that's fine. That's absolutely fine. So, everyone is dead. Or they will be dead, or they have been dead, will have are been dead.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
In any case, everything is dusty and grim. The doctor's chat with the spoon lady is very sad. I mentioned about this in my review for The Devil's Cord, how everyone was just so very sad and nobody could really figure out why. It's very much the same vibe here. Everything is so fucked that even people's memories are dying. The Doctor is defeated, and it is probably one of his most crushing defeats to date, to be honest. He failed on a cosmic scale, so they run away in the memory TARDIS. I wanted to hate that idea, but I just can't. The daft little set they have for it is just too silly not to love. Although, thinking about it, doesn't this mean that there are, at one point, 3 different versions of the TARDIS knocking about? Because you've got Ncuti Gatwa's TARDIS, the one that's been taken over by Sutek. You've got the memory TARDIS, and you've also presumably got 14's TARDIS knocking around somewhere. I'm glad that we didn't get 14 and Donna back again. As much as I love Catherine Tate and David Tennant, I think we've seen enough from them in Doctor Who for the time being. But at the same time, you'd think that 14 would be a bit more concerned about all this death sand going around. This was always going to be an issue from the moment that they introduced By Generation. If you have 2 versions of the Doctor hanging around and something incredibly cataclysmic is happening, why is one version of them just sitting things out? Poor Mel. I mean, it works out in the end, but I like Mel, and it was not fun seeing her getting taken over and killed by Sutek. But one hell of a performance from Bonnie Langford, both in her resisting Sutek and in her evil skull face form. I just want more Mel, please. Mel's fantastic. We get a callback to 73 yards. Both the episode and the actual measurement itself, which turns out to be significant in how the TARDIS perception filter works. We get a little clip of Roger Ap Gwilliam being awful as usual. I think we're meant to take it that the memory TARDIS is tapping into Ruby's memory and giving them a clue as to how to find her mother. Side note, I like the idea that Sutek is driven to distraction by the mystery of who Ruby's mother is, in much the same way as the audience is lured in by that mystery and made to think that there is something of cosmic significance going on there. It makes sense to me that this all-powerful being, supposedly all-powerful, we'll come back to that, would be so irritated by this one thing that he's not able to know. At first I was a bit confused as to how the TARDIS could find a memory that Ruby shouldn't have, since everything that happened in 73 Yards, including her meeting Roger Ap Gwilliam, was undone. However, we do get a little hint at the end of that episode that some memory of the events is lingering in Ruby's mind. She mentions at the start of the episode that she had been to Wales twice before, I think. And then at the end of the episode, after time has been reset, she sort of has this vague memory of a third time being there. So, okay, some memory of it lingers. Fair enough. Does any of this make 73 Yards make any more sense? No, not really. But it does give our heroes a clue as to how to find Ruby's birth mother, using Roger Ap Gwilliam's DNA testing database bullshit. I love that Ruby taunts Sutek with the knowledge that he seeks, and then denies him it. I don't feel like this series really had a big companion moment for Ruby. You know, a moment where she really takes matters into her own hands and faces down a baddie. But this counts, and it is pretty damn good. Maybe a bit late on in the series, but hey, we got it in the end. I like seeing Ruby and the Doctor working together. Don't think there's really been much time in this series for the Doctor and Ruby to really properly connect. The actors certainly have great chemistry together, and we are told a lot of the time that they are best friends, but we don't often really see it. There are very few sort of character building moments between those two. But this counts, and it's pretty good. Maybe could have chucked in a few more episodes for this series so we had more time to properly establish the relationship between the Doctor and Ruby before literally the last episode of the series. And so we come to the final showdown between the Doctor and Sutek, mighty god of death and whatnot. And they just attach a leash to him and drag him through the time vortex using the TARDIS. I do like the gag that the Doctor is essentially taking the big dog for walkies, and I quite like the visuals of Sutek ripping open the time vortex. There are a couple of things that I did almost take issue with. The first is that this is essentially another big reset button universe reboot situation. It's not quite on the same scale as the other times that the Doctor has had to do that, but this still counts in my book. But at the same time, how else were they going to wrap it up, really? And it is quite cathartic to see the Doctor so soundly defeated and then to have this moment of triumph. The second issue is that he kills Sutek. This was something that I was very much against, but I get that he didn't really have much of a choice. He tried banishment before, and it didn't really stick. I'm just glad that he didn't do it coldly or callously. This version of the Doctor, perhaps more than any other, is dead set on saving everyone he can, even witless racist scumbags. Sutek had to die. He was pure evil, you know? He just wanted to kill everyone, and there's no reasoning with him. But the Doctor certainly was not happy or dismissive about having to do so. He didn't do it vengefully, but as a reluctant last resort, and I'm fine with that. One thing I did very much take issue with, Sutek just lets this happen to him. So I get that the Doctor and Ruby are using like mass cancelling gloves and rope or whatever they are. I don't think that high-tech bondage gear would have been particularly effective against, say, the Toymaker or Maestro, who could have just blinked that stuff out of existence. But Sutek, supposedly the most powerful of all the gods, the one that all the other pantheon fear, he just sort of sits there and roars and lets it happen. Just a bit underwhelming, to be honest. And then we come to the conclusion of Ruby's story as she finally tracks down her bio-mum. Okay, I get what we're going for here. Like the Doctor says, we create our own expectations when it comes to these sorts of mysteries. We make up wild theories to try and explain things, when often the simplest and most mundane answer is the right one. I like that our expectations, specifically my expectations, were subverted like this. And of course, I like that Ruby gets a happy ending. But if this was the way that it was going, why was it so heavily foreshadowed that there was something more going on with Ruby? Maestro even comments on the fact that Ruby just seems wrong, like there's out of place, like there's something more going on there. And now, look, I am all for having my expectations subverted. I think I'm one of the only 3 surviving people who actually like the Mandarin twist in Iron Man 3. The rest were lost in the Great Purge. But I can't help but feel cheated when it is so heavily hinted at, and perhaps even outright stated, that there is something significant going on with a character, only to be told, well, no, actually. Just no. In conclusion, a lot of mixed feelings about this series. Good or bad, at least I can say this series has made me feel something. The last few years of being stuck in the Chibnall era has been a rotation of boredom and frustration. It's just good to have the series back on form again. We definitely need more episodes per series. A lot of stories ended up feeling rushed, and we did not get nearly enough time for the Doctor and Ruby to properly establish their relationship. There's a lot of us being told that they're best friends, but apart from the odd hug now and then, we don't ever really see it. The twists and turns were very twisty and turny, and while I'm not quite on board with all of them, it was quite refreshing and exciting to be kept guessing right up until the very end. There's still plenty of mysteries to talk about, in particular Mrs. Flood. Mrs. Flood was fantastic in this series, by the way. Just spectacularly off putting. I cannot wait to find out more about what her deal is. The Sutek reveal could have been foreshadowed a bit more clearly. We really should have got more weird god stuff in this series in general, but the door is still open for more of that in seasons to come. So, good series. Mostly good, I mean. Occasionally great, but could have been greater. Certainly interesting, though. A lot of new things being tried, and I'm very much in favour of that. The finale was fine. It was exciting and scary and all that good stuff. None of my predictions came true, which obviously I'm furious about. But I did appreciate the misdirection with Susan Twist. I very much preferred my idea for where this series should have gone. But then I would, wouldn't I? Go back and watch my other video for a breakdown of that idea, and then feel free to tell the BBC what a visionary genius I am and how I should be immediately hired to write for Doctor Who. I still have faith that we are building to some major reveal with all this fourth wall breaking that's going on. Mrs. Flood is clearly a very important character and very fun as well. And like I said, I cannot wait to find out more about her. And if they are building to anything even remotely like what I was theorizing for this series, honestly, they better not, or you will never hear the end of my gloating. If you thought that Sutek was a terrifying evil to be stopped at all costs, just wait until you have to deal with smug Nerdmo for the rest of time.